We reenact.
Yes, you're very good.
Live.
Very real. I'll send you.
Good day, fourth graders.
Good day.
Good day, everyone.
We're so happy to be here with you today at the Brinkerhoff House in Hopewell Junction, right in our backyard. So we're going to start out with our Colonial kitchen with these two lovely Colonial ladies. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Tracy Wolf, also known as Pepper Brinkerhoff. We all have different names here.
And I am Cindy Wolf, aka Abigail.
And joining us is our site manager, and we just want to thank you for all that you've done for making this happen.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Good day, everybody.
This is Mr. Solder, so he's the site manager.
Welcome. I'm so happy that you're all with us today. And I know my own experience how important Colonial Day is at Gay Head, because I have two of my children went to Gay Head and went through Colonial Day in fourth grade. So this is just extra special for me to be able to host this here.
And we're so happy to be here. So, we ready to get started?
Woohoo!
Okay.
So first we're going to start with butter making. So because it takes a while and you have to shake the canning jar.
Yep, so you're gonna take your canning jars. And you're gonna take your heavy cream. So let's
Open your canning jar.
open your canning jars up.
Now the optimal temperature for heavy cream is room temperature. It depends on how cold or hot it is and how long it takes to make butter.
I've taken a half hour to do butter, and I've taken 5 hours to do butter, the same amount. I've actually been churning this morning already for about a half hour. So now you're gonna close up your canning jars, and you're gonna start shaking. And keep shaking.
Make sure it's really close.
Oh, yeah.
Close it tightly.
Oh yeah, please. So what you're doing is you're trying to separate the particles in the cream. So what I'm using, this is a butter churn, and I'm using a T-shaped. So what I'm doing is I'm just turning it and I'm scraping the bottom of the churn, and I'm just keep doing that. It's the same technique as what you're doing when you're shaking your little canning jars. And we're trying to separate the buttermilk from the butter fat. And the butter fat is what you're gonna eat. The buttermilk you're gonna drink, because that tastes amazing. And we never waste anything.
Or use it for cooking.
Or use it for cooking. Yeah, you can make pancakes and waffles and biscuits and everything yummy. So after you've been doing this for a while, because this is gonna probably take a while, my sister is going to tell about everything in the kitchen as well. But I have lots of different stuff on the table here as well. So after your butter has solidified and separated from your buttermilk, you're gonna do a process called washing your butter. And you're gonna take the cloths that were given to you.
Cindy,
Once it separates, it's not. I don't know if it will.
we'll do those at the end, those instructions. So once your butter is solidified, you can also make it into cute little, these are butter presses.
They're all different shapes, different symbols.
Can you see? Can you see all the little,
You've got all little symbols and stuff on them. So if I was gonna be selling my butter to my neighbors, I would press a little stamp in it so they knew that it was the butter that was coming from my farm.
so butter churns were in all different sizes and they did it all day long.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you had a large butter churn like this one, everybody would take turns because your arms get very tired. We'll get other things in here in the kitchen. We had another one of the chores would be spinning. Now, towards the beginning of the Revolutionary War, right before, a couple like decades before, a lot of the clothes were store bought and the cloth was store bought. So we had to relearn how to make clothes and homespun. And that was a big thing because women would get together and have quilting bees. And that's how we kind of did our part in the Revolutionary War, where we would get together and talk about things and refuse to buy stuff from the British. So you would have your spinning wheel to spin the yarn and the fabric and the thread. But we also, you would have a whole, I'm sorry. Let's see, what do we have over here?
Well, you were talking about spinning?
Spinning, yes,
Spinning
the
with the heckle.
heckle.
Which-
Before, when you have sheep, you would have sheep. And if you had sheep, you would
Shear them,
shear the sheep.
right?
And then after that, with the wool, you'd have to separate all of the fibers and the gross stuff that's in it, like the oils and
Mhm.
they're sheep, so they would have dirt.
Yeah, dirt in the fur,
Fur.
in their
Yeah,
wool.
and then you wouldn't get it nice and clean.
Yeah, so you would run the wool through this to basically like a comb.
Yep.
And you would just comb it out. You would also use this to separate the seeds out of flax.
Right.
To make thread when you're making your clothes.
And we didn't waste anything from the flax seed.
Yep.
It would be eaten.
Don't stop shaking those canning jars.
Yeah, keep shaking the canning jars, back and forth. Another one of your chores would be candle making, which I've heard that you guys have been learning. So I have a little beeswax. I have after candle, meaning the finished product. And you would heat up your wax and put in wicks into your candle form.
Yeah, where is that?
But you guys are probably gonna be dipping the candles, which was another form, they would do that outside.
The candle molds really were for the rich and also the churches. Most of the dipping was done by hand. So you would have had, groups of people that would get together, all of the women and the children, and they would do the hand dipping. So it was really going more into the 18th century that you had those molds that were more readily available to the
Right.
public.
Right.
Right.
I'm also a chandler, so I do the candle dipping as well.
A chandler means
Yeah, I
person
make
who makes
candles.
candles. And you'd have different kinds of lanterns. This was a courting candle for when you started courting, which happened at a very early age in the colonial days. So your parents, your father, would, depending on how tall the candle was, that's how long you could be with your friend.
Yes, and if he really liked you, the candle would be tall. If he didn't really like you, it would be short.
Really short. But that also meant you weren't going to marry that man. So I have a little bit of kitchen tools here too. Now, we did use knives. They're not like the knives we have today. Cindy has one.
This is my belt knife. I keep it on my belt at all times. This would have been used for paring, cutting my apples. I use it for cutting bread as well, and I use it all the time. That's why it always stays on my belt.
How are you doing with the butter, everybody?
Starting to harden.
Oh,
It's getting harder here too.
So also I would have my ulu, or a chopper, and I would have herbs from the garden. We have an herb garden here, and we have a regular garden. And during the winter, after harvest, we would dry all of our herbs above the fire and in the root cellar too. We had a root cellar here.
Yes, we do, right under the floor.
Yeah. That's where you would put all your crops and your canned foods. They would just put them in glass they had glass. They would put them in containers and store
Root vegetables.
root vegetables, apples, butter. After you finished your large butter, you would put it in the root.
You preserve it with
Yeah,
salt.
that temperature stays pretty consistent
Yeah,
down
correct.
there throughout the year.
Yeah.
So that is your refrigeration.
We didn't have refrigerators back in the 1700s. Nor did we have a lot of ice because it was winter. We didn't have ice houses. So the chopper, you would just chop, not your hand, but whatever, herbs, cheese.
But if you notice that it's rounded, so you could actually use it in a bowl as well. So they actually can chop back and forth. That's what I use mine for.
I said I have one in.
Yeah.
A mezzaluna.
I also have one my husband made in the blacksmith shop for me. This is a mortar and pestle. You would put your spices, your herbs, your salt,
Because we're gonna need salt later.
and the salt came ground coarsely. We know that now as kosher salt.
This is ground coarse.
How's your butter doing? Is it getting hard? Getting hard? Feel it like a ball?
It's gonna start like sloshing around because it gets thick, like almost like whipped cream, and then once it hits the whipped cream, you're almost there. And then once it starts to separate, you'll hear like sloshing going around, and that's the buttermilk and the butterfat finally separating.
Great, and
It
then
takes a while.
it does. It's very frustrating sometimes. These are butter paddles. So when you're done with your butter and you have washed your butter, which Ms. Wolf will also tell you how to do, get your butter, a little rock of butter, and
You're gonna mesh it together so that you're gonna try out. This also helps because there's little slots on these butter paddles. What that's doing is you're also pressing out the extra bit of the buttermilk because you want to get as much of that buttermilk out as possible, or it's going to actually spoil. And that's what they use the salt for, was for preservation. But if you don't get all that the buttermilk out, you're going to spoil your butter because butter does not need to be refrigerated as long as it is properly preserved.
yeah, which is why today you can take the butter that you get at the store and leave it out on the counter in a container or
Yep.
whatever. Let's see what else. Oh, if you notice these cones, these are what our sugar came in. They would come in a cone. This is a large cone of sugar. And, I didn't bring my little.
Oh, I don't have a pincher either.
You would take it off by like using a little pincher.
That's sugar?
This
Yeah,
is
that's
sugar.
Oh.
And this is also white sugar. This is dark brown sugar, molasses sugar. And this is brown sugar. This is maple
Where would they
sugar.
get the white sugar from?
All sugar was imported.
From
So,
the islands.
Jamaica and.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, I think most of the Caribbean, they had sugar plantations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a lot of your spices and all of that kind of stuff, everything was imported. So that's why also during the Revolutionary War.
So we have a question.
Yes.
So a question is, what happens when the butter starts to get hard?
When the butter starts to get hard right now, because I've been doing this for a while, but it's prior.
I think ours-
Once it finally separates, what you're gonna do is take the cloth that you were given and it's called wash your butter. So you're gonna separate that out. So you're gonna use your bowl that you have in a little jar into that, and you're gonna put it into a little ball, and squeeze. And you wanna get, like I said, as much of that buttermilk out as possible. And then you're gonna take it out of your cloth, you're gonna salt it, and you can eat it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Goes really
It's so good.
nicely with Johnny cakes. So they have your Johnny cakes recipe in their Colonial kit.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you.
I remember the Johnny cakes we got.
Oh, yeah, those were good.
Yes, the Johnny Cakes would be fresh maple syrup that you,
Oh, yeah.
in this area, when we had trees. A lot of this area was farmland. They would maple syrup, maple sugar. The kitchen work was from morning until night. You really never stopped in the kitchen. You'd be baking bread, making food, making your food, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Those are at different times too. Your big meal would be at lunch. And because you were out working in the fields or you were working in the farm with your animals and.
Plus, remember, you also didn't have electricity for lights, so you would want to make sure you were eating during the day.
Right.
you had light in the house instead of using up your candles, because candles were very difficult, they take a long process. Because if you don't have bees and you're not using beeswax, you're taking the fat from the animals that you're slaughtering to eat, and you're gonna render that down, and then you have the whole process of going through and making candles. So it's a long process, and you don't wanna use your candles every single day.
So you would wake up when the sun woke up, and then you would go to bed when the sun went to bed. And most of the kitchens had a bread oven, a beehive oven, where you would make bread. Here at the Brinker Hop House, we have an outdoor
It's
oven.
not moving anymore.
Is it?
Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking about the butter.
How's it going?
How's
I
the
feel like
butter?
it's not moving anymore. I don't know if it.
Oh,
Your
that's
butter
all
stops
about-
moving?
Yeah.
Cindy?
You gotta keep going though.
All right.
So let me see what yours looks like. Oh yeah, we're getting there. You're like at whipped butter stage. Yeah, you're like a whipped butter stage. So you could technically swap and
If you can't get it more,
if you can't get it more, you can squeeze it out. So let's see. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, see, this is whipped butter.
Yes.
So you
So
could,
can we,
you could actually salt this. Yeah, you wanna bring that over? You can actually salt this and eat this. You just have to refrigerate this type of butter because you haven't separated out the buttermilk and the butter
oh, that
fat.
makes sense.
So because it has that still in there, but if you keep going, it'll
Yummy.
still, so you might have to change the way you're shaking it, going back and forth in order to get it to separate.
Back and forth.
Back and forth, up and down, like change the different ways. So if you notice when I'm churning, I turn it at the bottom and it scrapes off the bottom, but at the same time I'm going up and down. So it doesn't seem like I'm actually moving a lot, but there's a ton of movement going on here. And I don't have a lot of cream in here, so I'm gonna come over and show you that this I've been working on since about 8:30 and hasn't gotten very far. But this is literally the process. This is how I do it all day long.
So
And
what would be
eventually-
the average time in colonial times?
Well,
Like,
if
what
it's
would be
warm
the-
out, you're gonna be doing it and it's gonna take maybe 15, 20 minutes if your cream is very warm. And most of it was warm. After you have, taken care of, milking your cows, you wait for the cream to come to the top. So that's where that saying, the cream of the crop comes from, is you're then scraping off that cream, you're putting it into your big churn. And then once you have your churn full, it's so now it's lukewarm, you're gonna then start churning. So it's not something that is a same day process because you don't have that many cows unless you had a dairy farm. And then that would be a different story.
Then you would be making butter to sell.
Forever. Yes, exactly, butter to sell, which is where I would use my stamps.
So you never let your fire go out
Nope.
because that was your cooking, that was your heat. Most of the houses were one room, so, and a upstairs.
Which this house was originally, was just this one room.
You see the fire from here?
Can you see the fire? You can come closer.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
on.
your heat, your cooking.
Colonial times or like way later?
After the revolution, the law part of the house was added on.
So you would, the parents, babies, small children would sleep in the room. The older children, if there was not enough room here, they would sleep upstairs. Heat rises, so they were warm, but they weren't like as warm as they are in here. This is how we cooked. We would put a pot. This is, I don't know where my cooking thing is. No.
So while you're looking for that, we have another question. We have a lot of butter questions. So were there certain people who made butter?
So it was usually the women and the children. So, boys when they were younger, girls especially, and
Butter question. As far as putting it in,
yes.
so can you comment on that?
So what you're not gonna put it into water, you're gonna pour water and then squeeze the ball underneath the water. So that'll make it easier, because I usually just pour it over with a cup.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've actually never done that.
Really? You've never washed your butter?
I've never washed my butter.
I wash it all the time just because it gets more and more of that buttermilk out.
When I make butter at camp, we do reenacting, we do Revolutionary War reenacting, we were camp followers. and we follow the camp, the men, the soldiers. And when we're making butter at camp, it usually is.
It doesn't last.
It doesn't last, because I make bread. and-
Yes, yes.
She makes the bread, I make the butter. It's all gone by the
So
next meal.
basically, you don't have to put it underwater, but you should.
You don't
put
have to,
You don't have to put it
But I
underwater.
do it just to get out more of it if you're gonna have any leftovers, but
Yep.
90% of the time, there's not gonna be leftovers,
Yeah.
so.
And for that little amount, I wouldn't
Yeah.
worry about the cold water.
Another question about the butter. Was there a specific time that you made butter? Like, was there a
So-
specific?
Because it depended on how many cows you had. So if you had more than one cow, you would be doing butter more often. But you can do butter year round, and that's what's good about it. But, like things like candle making, that was not done at just once. That was done one time during the year, so you get all of your candles done at once. And that was done during the spring, or it was done in the fall, depending on what was, more apparent for that area.
5 minutes?
It's not gonna turn my butter. How's your butter doing?
Good, it's kind of squishing around.
Squishing around? Okay.
Yeah.
I can hear it squishing around. So let's try, what we're gonna do is
How's
we're
your
gonna
butter
try.
at home doing?
Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm cutting up my cheesecloth real quick,
Or your material?
or material, whatever you have at home. Okay.
You
We're gonna
can
do
buy cheesecloth at the store if you want to make more butter later. You can also use a bigger canning jar.
Walmart has it cheap. Oh yeah, well, see, we separated. You've got butter in here.
Right.
Yep, so we're gonna.
Yay!
Ready? We've got butter and buttermilk.
Nice.
Awesome, so now I'm gonna show you.
So that is just buttermilk, like you buy in the store.
This is buttermilk that you buy in the store, and you can drink it.
Buttermilk was.
Yep. So now, this is where butterballs came from. And the reason also I use the cold water too is because it also helps to harden up your butter. So you can see that there's still some buttermilk coming out of the outside of it, along the edges of it. Tracy, can you pour some, pepper. Pepper, yeah, pepper. Can you pour some of the salt? Perfect. And then just mix in your salt, and you're good to go.
Amazing.
Nice.
That was perfect timing.
Wow.
Awesome.
Couldn't time that any better.
Right?
Yeah. Slice a piece of, get a piece of bread,
And you got it.
or the Johnny cakes.
Yep. And then also what I used for, once my cloths are now covered in butter, I throw it into my fire as a fire starter.
So they wouldn't reuse the cloth.
You could if you can clean it enough, but 90% of the time there is no cleaning it. Yeah, I mean, everything I own, because I do butter so often, everything I own is covered and smells like butter. So all of my clothes smell like butter constantly, which is not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. But yeah,
You
that's
mix
the
some
butter
honey
making.
in there?
You can make
Yeah.
anything.
Maple.
Yeah,
I
we do
made
maple.
pumpkin butter one
Yep.
time.
We do maple. Yep, you could even cut up fruit and make a compote with that
Garlic.
too. Yeah.
Onions,
Yep.
anything you think of.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I know you can get some maple syrup.
Maple syrup.
Alrighty, so I think we're just going to, did you want to close? Did you want to close with any other?
No.
I think we're all
I
set.
think that's it. If you have any questions, we'll answer them.
Yep, so
If they
continue
come
to
through.
post your questions to the jam board. Also, be patient with the line and the link. Once we go outside, it might be blurry from time to time, but just, it'll keep coming in and out. So we hope you enjoyed this part. Thank you so
You're welcome.
much.
Oh, you-
Keep
you're
sending
welcome.
pictures.
Keep sending pictures, please, at home, and, your questions, we'd love to hear your questions, and we wanna thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
our beginning of our day.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So they come back at 9.
Yes, we'll be back at 9:45. Okay.
Yay.
Good job. Great.